What is up, enthusiasts? It is Cedar Flags here, and welcome back to another one of my videos. Due to popular demand, I wanted to bring this series back into my third installment. Just like many other works of art, roller coasters have their critics. You hear a lot of unpopular opinions with music and movies and television shows, but today I'm going to dive into the world of roller coasters. Many enthusiasts share popular opinions, and though I share most of them, there are some opinions I do distance myself from. Now, like I said, this is the third installment to my series. If you haven't watched the first two already, I will link them in the description below. Make sure to watch those two first before moving on to this one. But without further ado, this is Cedar Flags, and here are my top 5 unpopular opinions for part 3. Before I start this video, I just want to let you all know that only a fifth of my viewers are actually subscribed to my channel. So if you come back to watch my videos and you're not subscribed yet, definitely press that subscribe button. Without further ado, let's get to the unpopular opinions. For our first unpopular opinion, we are going to Carowinds on the border of North and South Carolina. This amusement park is owned by Cedar and has been rapidly expanding throughout the past few years, adding coasters such as Copperhead Strike, Intimidator, and the one and only Fury 325, mainly considered one of the best B&Ms or roller coasters on Earth. I watch a lot of roller coaster top 20s and top 10s, and I also watch a lot of countdowns of individual manufacturers. And when coaster enthusiasts talk about the top 10 or top 20 B&Ms they've ridden, Fury will be at the top most of the time. In fact, 9 times out of 10, I've seen Fury 325 clock in at the top. And while I do respect that opinion, it is not my opinion. Fury, while it isn't anywhere near my least favorite B&M, is not my favorite B&M. It's actually my second favorite B&M that I've personally ridden. Now, it is behind Diamondback at Kings Island in Mason, Ohio, the B&M Hyper opening up in 2009. So, why do I like Diamondback better than Fury 325? Well, I am an absolute sucker for two things: duration and airtime. And let me say, Diamondback is long. I mean, I believe Diamondback clocks in at around 75 seconds. It is a massive ride, and while Fury speeds through its layout, Diamondback goes through multiple elements at slower speeds, but still pulling forces. For example, if you sit in the back row of Diamondback, my personal favorite row, you get some insane airtime. In fact, going out of those parabolic airtime hills, you get some good ejector airtime. Some ejector airtime on the level of something like I-305. Nothing too good, but still, it's some pretty good ejector that you would love to feel. Now, Fury has some incredible ejector, but it is very short-lived. Diamondback has extremely sustained ejector hills, and the longer trains complement the hills. If you're sitting in the back, you can get 5-second airtime moments, especially on the hill right after the drop. This ride is incredible in my opinion, and the splashdown really caps it all off. Do I think it's the best B&M on Earth though? No, I actually would give that title to Shambhala at PortAventura in Spain. Let me say, this looks like a bigger, better version of Diamondback in every way. It's a massive hypercoaster, and one of the tallest on Earth. It has some incredible airtime moments that look absolutely insane, and has that stadium seating that I absolutely love. Now let me just say, Fury is an incredible ride, and it's right under Diamondback in my top 10. But I would definitely consider Diamondback the victor of all the B&Ms that I have personally been on. Up next, we go all the way down to Tampa, Florida to visit Busch Gardens Tampa. And let me say, when I visited this park in April of 2021, the park was really running on all cylinders. The park was at its full potential, and the rides were running the best they could ever run in my personal opinion. Even though Iron Gwazi isn't open, we are not talking about Iron Gwazi in this video, but we are talking about the existing rides as of June of 2021. Sorry, Iron Gwazi, but in my personal opinion, something that is very unpopular, Cheetah Hunt is currently the best ride at the park. Now, this is not counting Iron Gwazi. Without a doubt, when Iron Gwazi opens up, it will be the best at the park, but in my opinion, right now, Cheetah Hunt remains king. Now, you might be asking me, what about Kumba and Montu? Well, first of all, let's get to Kumba. I honestly found Kumba to be an average B&M looper, something on the levels of Raptor and Dominator, but Montu, let me say, Montu is absolutely insane. Montu is an incredible B&M invert, and I personally like it better than Banshee at Kings Island. I mean, if you want the perfect B&M invert, this seems like the complete experience. You have theming, near misses, and some insanely forceful elements. That Batwing in the back row is absolutely intense, and one of the most intense positive G elements you could ever experience. But why is Cheetah Hunt better than both of those? I don't know why, but it seems like every time Intamin tries to complete a task, besides operations, they seem to succeed. And let me say, this ride is absolutely incredible in my opinion. First off, let's get to the theming. I love the interactive theming between the cheetah enclosures and the trenches in the ground, but the layout in general, I mean, this ride really surprised me. A lot of people say don't expect Maverick, and I wasn't. And maybe that's the reason why I was so pumped for this ride. I was expecting a lesser version of Maverick, but still a good world-class Intamin Blitz, and that's exactly what I got. This ride is pure fun. A ride doesn't have to be super intense to be a great ride, and this is a perfect example of that. You have some great ejector airtime pops mixed in with family elements. You have that insane inversion which gives some great hang time, and you have some good positive elements too. This ride gives off some good forces, while at the same time making you have a very fun time. It appeals to people of all ages, and from ages 5 to 55, you're gonna love this ride. I do know a select few people that would put this as their number one, few people on Instagram and on YouTube, you know who you are. But at the same time, even though I wouldn't go that far, I'd still say it's pretty high up in my rankings. Now, I would like to split this video into two categories, one being opinions that I've heard a few people talk about, and the other being opinions that I've heard no one talk about. This is the first out of the two in the latter category, and I really don't know a single other person who shares this opinion, but oh well, let's get right into it. I have ridden two variations of flying coasters, one being the B&M Flyer, and the other one being the Vekoma Flying Dutchman, more specifically Nighthawk at Carowinds and Firehawk at Kings Island, and Manta at SeaWorld Orlando. These three coasters are incredible, and I love the concept of flying on a ride, but at the same time, I would say that Flying Dutchmans are more forceful than the B&Ms, and let me explain why. That loop. I mean, I've experienced both a pretzel loop and a Flying Dutchman loop, and let me say, I think the Flying Dutchman loop is more forceful than a pretzel loop. I don't know why, but during the pretzel loop, I did get a great gray out and my stomach kind of dropped a bit, but on those Vekoma Flying Dutchman loops, oh my goodness, my stomach completely turned upside down, and it was one of the weirdest, most bizarre feelings I've ever felt on a roller coaster. It's absolutely incredible in my opinion, and I absolutely adore this element. It sucks though that the nearest one to me, Firehawk, was removed, for an overrated Giga of course. But let me just say, I am an absolute massive fan of these Flying Dutchman models, and I really wish that it would have caught on more because those loops are insane, especially near the front of the train. But you could be sitting in any row, and these loops will pin you to the back of your seat way more in my personal opinion than you would on a pretzel loop on a B&M. Now, for the first time in this video, we are going up to Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, a park I talk about a lot on this channel and one of my favorite parks of all time. I absolutely adore this place, even though it is massive, and we are getting right to one of their shining stars, Magnum XL 200. Now, before I dive into this opinion, I just want to say that back in the 80s and early 90s, this thing had to have been incredible. I recognize the historical significance of it, and I do think it is one of the most historical coasters on the planet. But when people compare it to coasters of today's standards, I honestly laugh a bit. I know people who rank this in their top 5 at the park, and I honestly think that's lunacy. This coaster is nothing but a jerky aero hyper with some very jerky and shaky airtime moments that are not enjoyable in my personal opinion. Now, I love forceful janky airtime moments, like Skyrush's first drop, or the majority of Twisted Timbers. Now let me just say, this is not that. There's a difference between a lovable kind of bump and a rough, jerky transition that will hurt your thighs. and Magnum is the latter. Those hills leading up to the brake run honestly are not fun at all. Instead of putting your hands up and preparing for some insane airtime, I feel the need to brace and protect my thighs from the brutal airtime that's about to ensue. People say Skyrush has thigh-crushing airtime. No, this has thigh-crushing airtime. And maybe you're into that, but in my personal opinion, even in the Magic Seat, this ride is not enjoyable at all. In the first half of the ride, much worse than the second half. It's extremely shaky, and I am really not a fan of those transitions. While the airtime in the first half might be okay, it is completely ruined by the twister elements, especially that turnaround that will completely bash you into each side of your seat. I used to really like this ride, even more than Phantom at Kennywood, but at the same time, the last few rides I've gotten throughout the past few years have not been enjoyable in the slightest. I've ridden everywhere. Front car, middle seats of the front car, and of course the Magic Seat. I've ridden in the back row, I've ridden in the middle. I have tried everything to enjoy this ride, but I am not a fan. I always get off disappointed and wishing I skipped the ride instead. This ride isn't necessarily bad, but it's not good either. I would actually prefer a ride like Gemini or at Kings Island, both Vortex and the Bat. Rip Vortex, by the way. This is nowhere near my favorite Arrow, unfortunately, and hopefully they could do something to remedy it, but at the same time, I would rather keep it to its 80s significance, because I know it is a lot for Cedar Point to handle. Just a quick note before we move on, I realized that in my first unpopular opinion video, I absolutely bashed Kings Island, but in this video, I have praised Kings Island in 3 out of my 5 unpopular opinions. Oh well, Kings Island in my opinion is a very polarizing park, and has a lot of ups and downs, but on to the 5th. Finally, we get to the 5th unpopular opinion. In historic coaster fans, I would say hold on as tight as possible. This is going to be a tough one for you. Now, when people talk about their favorite restraints, buzz bars will undoubtedly come up in the conversation. But personally, riding in these PTC buzz bar trains, they're not as enjoyable as many people say, and they are nowhere near my favorite restraint, even for room. The first problem I have is a lot of people focus on the airtime room you get, and while that is extremely true, looking at you Phoenix and Swamp Fox, there is another problem I have. The fact that you are really crammed in that train. I mean, when you sit down, there are walls all around you, and you really can't see that much on your side. You are really crammed in there, and if the ride is seat dividers, even more so. Now don't get me wrong, I absolutely love these restraints. I love getting some of the weirdest airtime of your life on rides like Swamp Fox, Comet, and of course Phoenix, but at the same time, they are nowhere near my favorite even for room. I mean, talking about room, I get the same standing airtime on Phantom's Revenge as I do Phoenix, and that's saying something. Seriously, I don't know if it's because I'm bigger, but I really don't get the same enjoyment of these buzz bars as I do with other restraints, such as the Jackrabbit seatbelt. I mean, I talk about Jackrabbit not at all, but let me just say Jackrabbit at Kennywood is an incredible ride if you want some insane airtime. If you sit near the back, you are going to get some of the scariest, most revealing standing airtime of your life. But when I'm riding Phoenix, I don't get the same enjoyment in the airtime hills. You still feel like you're crammed in those tight walls on that PTC train, and I would much prefer something like a Jackrabbit restraint on this than what they currently have. But anyway, those are my unpopular opinions. I love posting these videos to rile up some of my fans, and let me know what some of your unpopular opinions are in the comments below. I have heard some pretty insane unpopular opinions, like people who absolutely hate Maverick, or people who can't stand Skyrush's restraints. But anyway, let me know in the comments below what you think, what your unpopular opinions are, and what your thoughts on mine were. This is Cedar Flags, and I will see you all later.